Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. In today's podcast, I want to explore a topic that often receives limited attention: preparing a company or your company for a successful exit with a specific focus on the technology due diligence phase. This process can significantly impact the outcome of a sale. And today, we are fortunate to have two experts join us to share their insights. Doug Kahn, Managing Director and co-founder at Newport Partners, a consulting firm that specializes in business transformation advisory services, and Kutluk Uslu, Principal Technology Advisor at Matellio, a software engineering firm focused on digital product development and enterprise IT optimization. Together, they will provide valuable guidance on identifying areas for prioritization, understanding company suitor preferences, and implementing remediation strategies. Welcome, Doug and Kutluk. How are you?
Thanks, Mark. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having us on the podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, I'm excited to have both of you guys on the podcast. Specifically, I cover a number of large technology companies, either from a technology ingredient standpoint or a product solution standpoint. It's always interesting to get this kind of business perspective on maybe the behind the scenes things that go on with startups or even companies that have been around a long time that are looking to get into a private equity position. You are two experts to really have a great conversation with about this. And now that the political landscape is we've gotten some firmness on it, it'll be interesting to get your perspectives on how that kind of factors into the equation here. But before we do that, what I like to do is generally get kind of an individual profile on each of you guys. So let me pull up my slides here, and Doug, we'll start with you and introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm Doug Kahn. I've spent over 25 years in the technology industry. I've worked at Fortune 500 companies. I've worked at NASDAQ traded companies. I've worked in private equity. I've worked at a startup. So fairly broad range of experiences, but all really focused on technology and also telecom.
Great. And as we can see on the screen, Doug, we got a QR code for you. So if you want more information on Newport Partners, people will be able to scan that and head right off to your website. Let's pull Kutluk into that discussion. Let me pull up your bio slide, Kutluk. Go ahead.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everybody. I'm a hands-on technologist, operations and M&A executive with over 30 years of experience in startups, public and private companies, as well as private equity. I've led business units, spearheaded the end-to-end M&A activities, especially in IT, cybersecurity, and technology, covering all the way from initial qualification, due diligence, transition, integration, restructuring to post-acquisition operational support. I've been involved in over 30 acquisition and divestiture transactions, and specializing in corporate carve-outs and distressed buyouts. As Mark pointed out, you can click on the QR code to learn more about Matellio.
Well, that's great. Well, let's jump into a couple slides here that I've framed because I really want to get kind of a flavor for where you guys are coming. And Doug, I teed up that topic on the presidential election. Thank God it's over. No more ads. No more crazy text messages to our phones every 3 minutes, regardless of what your political persuasion is. So I think a lot of people are relieved at that. But first and foremost, let's kind of chat about that in terms of how do you see the election impacting the private equity area?
So if you look at the pure number of transactions over the last, say, 2 to 3 years, we've seen a steady decline, certainly in the US, and it looks as though 2024 is going to continue that trend. Things are actually even worse in Europe. Europe has seen around a 30% year-on-year decline in the pure number of transactions. And if you look at the deals that are getting done, the vast majority of them are 100% equity deals. So that just shows you the impact that high interest rates have had in this industry. Now, going forward, barring anything unforeseen, we see the conditions for M&A transactions to start to improve considerably. So, for example, we think the Fed has done a very good job of systematically taking interest rates down. A 50 basis point reduction in September, followed by another 25 basis point reduction just last week. That's a good start. We would like to see rates continue to come down even further. Secondly, as you mentioned, Mark, the presidential election in the US is finally behind us. We think that that's a net positive in terms of creating more favorable conditions, especially in the M&A environment. And then finally, there's been a lot more pressure, I think, to get some resolution on the conflicts both in the Middle East and between Russia and the Ukraine, which is really causing a drag as well in terms of just the uncertainty that creates. If there could be some resolution there, that would be a trifecta.
I think it would be. Now, the one question I want to drill down on a bit is that most people, when they hear interest rates, they think of interest rates in terms of I want to go out and buy a car, short-term rates, or long-term rates. I want to do a mortgage. Why are interest rates so? I know it sounds like a trivial question, but just because I know you'll give me a detailed answer on this, especially for a company that might be looking for a suitor. Why are interest rates so important?
Well, it's critical in terms of how they do their financing. If you want to buy anything, whether it's a car or a house or a company. Yeah, so you're going to need a way to finance that, and the higher the interest rates are, the worse the economics get for transactions such as M&A transactions.
Kutluk, do you have anything to add to this section?
Because of the M&A activity softness, I believe that there has been a substantial increase in the dry powder. However, because of the higher interest rates, the valuation of the companies also was very, very high. So that actually prevented the private equities from entering the market. So as the interest rates change, I believe that things are going to start changing for the better.
Well, and the comment that Doug made on the war piece, I mean, that's obviously a pretty gnarly type of problem. There has been a lot of statements that the new incoming administration is going to do quick work at ending those wars, and I think we all hope that will happen, but that will happen. But again, that's a big unknown, and as we know, markets do not like uncertainty. And I imagine, Doug, especially when you're in an acquisition mode, companies that are suitors that are buying smaller companies to take them private, they don't like uncertainty either. So I suspect that global instability piece is going to be a pretty important topic for the next 12 months as the new administration kind of gets its footing. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. No question that continues to have an impact. And I think, as much of an impact as it has, worldwide, I think Europe is really feeling the effects of that, because I think there's a lot of concern that, if especially the war between Russia and Ukraine, if that were to expand, it could push into Western Europe, and obviously that would be a huge problem for that part of the world.
Well, let's look in a very favorable way. Let's look forward. Now, as you look at these market dynamics changing, what sectors in the M&A area do you think is going to get a lot of traction over the next 24 months? I'm sure you have a view on that. So let me just get your perspective, and then we can go into some of these themes.
Yeah, well, I think on the positive side, the factors that we see improving, as we've mentioned, are going to be beneficial regardless of industry vertical. So that's a good thing. That said, there's a lot of pent-up demand. We talk to private equity companies quite often, and a lot of them have been holding companies in their portfolios a lot longer than they intended to. And so we think there's a lot of pent-up demand, especially in sectors such as technology, biotech, and pharma, especially. But really across the board, I think what you're going to see as we get into Q1 and Q2 and beyond in 2025 is I'm not sure if it's really the floodgates are going to open, but certainly I think you're going to see a lot more M&A activity than we've seen over the last couple of years.
Now, Doug, do me a favor. I love that line. Successful companies are acquired, not sold. And there is a difference between the two.
Yeah.
So provide a little bit of color on that.
Sure. Yeah. So the way I always like to think about, exits and companies that are looking to do a transaction is the best way to do that is to have a company that's attractive. Don't think about the exit so much. Think about operational performance. And when you think about that, it's things like sustained profitability, generating cash, revenue growth. It's basically the business fundamentals that you want to have solid, so that when a potential suitor comes in and does their due diligence and starts to really look under the hood at the financials and at how the company's operating, they see a company that is profitable, that's growing, that has a plan for the future. And we can get into a lot of details around kind of what makes that company more attractive. But basically, focus on making the company successful, and then you'll have suitors coming in wanting to buy that company, as opposed to trying to push a company that's maybe doesn't really execute on the fundamentals. It's a lot harder to sell if you have that situation.
So, Kutluk, I want to pull you into the discussion very quickly. In that, I get a sense sometimes that companies that may be struggling, that they look to private equity as a salvation, and they have some big issues, operationally. Maybe they're looking at that bright shiny object. Hey, maybe they can come to the rescue. Let's talk about the exit strategies, the operational performance pieces, and why. And we're going to get into this at a much deeper level. Why is it so important that suitor companies don't want to acquire defective companies? They want to acquire companies that have a lot of potential. They're managed well. So give me a bit of more color in that, because I do, I suspect that there's a lot of, poorly run, smaller companies that they do want to get acquired, but they don't focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah, it actually depends. I mean, there are some definitely, that niche private equities are declining, but there are some private equities actually focus on these distressed companies, because they believe that they can add value by creating the optimizations, the operational optimizations to put the companies in the right path. But in general, nobody wants to buy a broken car, unless you know how to fix it, right? So most of the time, the private equities would like to buy a company which is actually doing well, but they do the due diligence to ensure that the company, the services, the products, team is future ready. So it's scalable, it's secure, so that when they take it over, they don't have to spend too much time and effort and take the unnecessary risks, to make money for paying any monies to that company.
Now, Doug, before we leave this slide, are there specific sectors in the M&A area that kind of stand out to you? I mean, hopefully, as all these good things happen, interest rates come down, maybe a more business-friendly administration, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I mean, I could argue that a rising tide affects all boats, but are there a few boats that you think might get a bit more tailwind than others?
Definitely. If you look back over the last couple of years, what you've seen is transactions that started and drug on for a long period of time, and in many cases ended up just dying. And you see that in the tech industry, you see that in biotech, you see that in healthcare, you see that in pharma, and especially the larger deals. I think with the kind of regulatory scrutiny that we've seen over the past few years, it's just put a chokehold on a lot of those deals, and there's many that you could highlight. So I think those sectors, again, you have a lot of pent-up demand for some of the larger deals, but also for some of the smaller deals.
Well, let's get into the slide that I really think is the home run slide here. And this is going to require both of your input. Both of you guys have been involved, and especially Doug with your firm, with your other principals have been involved in prior portions of their careers in pretty meaty acquisitions. Let's talk about how can tech companies position themselves better to strengthen their appeal. So I want to spend about 5 minutes each of you on these various topics, but Doug, I'll give you a chance first to kind of respond to this.
Sure. So it's kind of back to what we talked about earlier. I think the first thing you want to think about is really operating a strong company. So strong financially, strong technically, company with a robust pipeline of products, with a sort of a track record of R&D, where you're introducing products into the market that are successful. You're never 100% on that, but you kind of want to have a pretty good batting average. You also want to have some defensibility in terms of having some barrier to entry. So, for example, if you have a technology that is patentable, to the extent you can apply for and receive patents to at least give yourself some level of protection for a period of time. That helps a lot. So you obviously need to be innovative. You need to have sort of an active campaign going where you are applying for and being granted patents. That helps a lot. But also just in terms of being able to execute well. If you think about some companies, the barriers to entry may not be as high, but they execute so well that customers want to continue to do business with that company, and you can think of a lot of examples there. So again, that's what I would focus on: making sure the company is as strong as it can be, and then having some defensibility in terms of your value prop that makes it more difficult for competitors to kind of replicate what you're doing.
Now, Kutluk, as the resident technology guru on the call here, the question I have for you is, it's been my experience, even though I live in Las Vegas now, when I lived in good old Silicon Valley for 17, 18 years, I always got the sense with companies that were not public, they were private, they were growing, they had a solid product offering, a solid value proposition. If those companies were run by or founded by engineers, or the technology founders, had a very strong technology background, they kind of got into this field of dreams mindset that their technology was so incredible that the market would come right to them. And they, sometimes ignored some of the business issues, whether it was a messaging standpoint, whether it was a supply chain issue. But in that vein, how can you do me a favor and augment some of the comments that Doug made? Because it's really, really important that when they go through this technology phase review with a potential suitor, they really have to be honest with themselves, as they kind of present themselves.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, that's accurate. In a lot of cases, you build it, it will work, they will buy, doesn't always come true. And a lot of the companies that are built by the technologists, they build a product, what they believe is going to be liked by the others. I mean, they don't necessarily look at the needs. So it's very crucial for any company, any company's success, not just to build a product which does everything you think is perfect, is to meet the needs of the market and the users. So, as far as the the appeal is concerned for the potential acquirers, I'd like to add a few more things to Doug's list. And one of them is basically the technology stack. It has to be up to date, and it actually needs to meet the needs of the users, not the needs of the owners, right? And it needs to have enough intelligence property protection, because that actually makes the company more appealing. And another important thing, maybe not on a technology side, but from a finance side, is the recurring revenues. I mean, having recurring revenues, that's backed by customer contracts becomes very appealing during the acquisition process. At the end of the day, the acquirers want to buy a solution that's scalable, flexible, and that actually uses adoption from new technologies like in today's world, right? AI and microservices, and to have a solution that's cloud-based and cloud-native, to meet the needs of the current customer base. And additionally, just one more thing is on the owners should also be very cognizant about the regulatory compliance and the risk management, as well as having the company structure for attracting and retaining the top-notch talent.
Now, Doug, question I have for you is that, and I know you've probably encountered this yourself when you're dealing with different companies. Everybody wants to be like Apple. I want to be Apple. And honestly, Apple is Apple. And I don't think they can. And by the way, there's pluses and minuses to that, but that's a different podcast. The topic I want to go to is companies that have to be honest with themselves and look at themselves in the mirror. Look at all the things that you guys have laid out and say, you know what? We want to be very transparent on who we are, because many firms like Newport Partners are pretty good at kind of sorting, kind of cutting through the fogness, the fog of a company presenting themselves to you. So what guidance would you give companies in terms of that whole, hey, you know what, we want to present ourselves, obviously in a positive manner, but from a transparency standpoint, because at the end of the day, I think that's valued by firms like you in terms of evaluating that kind of opportunity for these small companies that would like to be acquired.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. I think the first thing to know is that it's always good to have role models, whether they're companies or individuals, to kind of look up to and to some degree to try to replicate. However, you never want to try to copy what another company is doing.
Yeah.
That's a losing strategy. Then all you do there is create more competition, and typically the company's already way ahead of where you are, and you're never going to catch up. And it's really a kind of it's sort of a fool's errand to try to do that. What you really need to do, I think, is you get the thought leaders in the company, and it's not always the executives, by the way. Sometimes it's first level engineers, just as brilliant as a CEO or a board member. But you get the thought leaders of a company together. And it can be from multiple functions, and I would actually advise that you pull from multiple functions, and you think about what is the unique value proposition that we have as a company, and what can we really excel at, and how do we differentiate ourselves from kind of others in this vertical or in this space, and then that's what you focus on. You get good at something that nobody else is doing. And you kind of build a business around that. So I think that's what's key, and that's hard to do. Because by definition, there's no examples to go look at. You have to kind of use your own experience and your own knowledge of the industry, your own knowledge about what customers want, your own knowledge about the technology, and figure out where you can create unique value that nobody else has right now. So that's
and I assume, Doug, I just not to assume it, I know it, is that one of the advantages of dealing with a firm like Newport Partners is when a company approaches you, says, we'd like to position ourselves to be acquired. You're providing consulting assistance. You're not just a transaction that you're trying to facilitate. You're in a position where you can provide with your partners years and years of guidance on, hey, now that we've examined who you are and you've gone through the different due diligence steps, which are multiple, I imagine you're in a position to provide some really good counseling.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're talking about, exits here, but that's actually only a really small piece of what we do. Our primary focus is really helping companies perform better. And a lot of what we do is we work with the companies, work with the leadership, work with the board, and we help them figure out where they should focus and where they should not focus. So we really help kind of with their business strategy in terms of, what's the most attractive lines of business for this company, whether they're already in them or whether, they could add them, and then where should they stop investing? So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's really our primary focus as a advisory firm. That's really what we help do, and then we help companies achieve those kinds of results based on where their strategy should be headed.
So, I'm a big sports aficionado, as you know, even though the Yankees lost a couple of weeks ago. We won't talk about that either. I kind of look at you guys and you're like a spring training organization that you take interesting prospects that need a lot of work and develop them into much more polished entities that could prepare themselves for an exit.
No question about it. I mean, we work with companies that have, in some cases, they've been around for decades, and they're just not achieving the profitability or the growth or, penetrating the markets that they expect to. And so we kind of help guide them through that. We also work with younger companies who, maybe have a great idea, but just haven't really been able to kind of, get that, escape velocity to really take off and really help them, flesh out the organization, flesh out, maybe their marketing strategy, or maybe their go-to-market strategy, or maybe it's their supply chain that's holding them back. Could be anything. And we help them sort of get them going on the right path.
Kutluk, in a couple of minutes we have left here, any other perspective you'd like to add?
Companies should be proactive. They should start planning the exit as early as possible. They need to structure the company, the infrastructure, technology, security, and processes for easy carve-out. And they should eliminate, if they cannot eliminate, minimize the corporate and other portfolio dependencies. But most importantly, they need to create a remediation plan, for any identified technology issues or security issues, and start implementing them. This way, they actually prevent the buyers from having the pleasure to find issues and have a leverage to reduce the selling price.
Well, guys, this has been a great dialogue. Again, thanks for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. I'm sure we're going to talk again about this. For viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the SmartTechCheck podcast part of your day and commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast and use these convenient on-screen QR codes to connect with me. You can also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @MarkVinaTechGuy. Doug and Kutluk, thanks again. And until next time, have a great week.
Thank you, Mark.